So we do want to talk about some more teams, but I guess just in interest of time, rather than going in depth into a whole bunch of teams, I'm just going to ask you. We'll do most impressive so far early in the season, most disappointing, but maybe perhaps other than the Utah Jazz, what's a team that's like really stood out to you and surprised you and made you feel warm, fuzzy feelings about their future this season?
Yeah, I really should have just saved the Jazz for this segment actually, but maybe I'm gonna throw it back your way and talk about the Portland Trailblazers.
Okay.
Because Dame's back and Dame looked healthy. Dame's abs are fine. His six pack injury is no longer haunting him. He's back to humiliating Russell Westbrook, and I like what I see out of the. I don't like what I see out of Yusuf Nurkic, but I like what
Yeah.
I see out of their wing rotation. There's some holes in this defense that I don't feel have been exploited by the opponents they've seen. Like there's times in that Lakers game where they're guarding LeBron James with Anthony and didn't really seem to have much of a help plan behind him, and it was like, oh my god. But just I think that it's an interesting collection of talent. Like seeing Justice Winslow, like be the guy who be the inbounds passer, and they're like, oh, you've got a defensive wing who can pass, and then you've got
Yeah.
Josh Hart, you've got a defensive wing who can rebound and ignite a transition attack, and Jerami Grant still wants to like attack the basket as recklessly as the coaches will let him. So and Shaden Sharp has had a couple of moments and looks really promising in that role. So um I think I was kind of worried that the Trailblazers were going to completely fall apart this year,
Yeah.
and it was just like 10 games in, they'd be looking to trade Dame Lillard's monster contract. But I'm warm and fuzzy about the Blazers in the first three games.
Yeah, I am too. They've been a pleasant surprise. Damian Lillard struggled game one. We had a prominent NBA commentator say he looked like he lost his burst and was maybe past his prime. And then game two and three, Damian Lillard comes out and drops 40 both games and looks like the Damian Lillard of old, just like splashing a dagger three against the Lakers. That kind of almost sealed the game. Jeremy Grant had a really nice lay in to fully seal it. But yeah, Damian Lillard looks like he's back. Anthony Simons, at least offensively, looks like a really awesome backcourt mate with him. But one thing that I do have to say is definitely giving me the most hope about the Blazers is just how good and capable Shaden Sharp looks.
You
Like
see him strip
immediately.
LeBron,
Yeah.
pick
I mean, this is
LeBron's
a guy.
pocket, went the other way.
He didn't play a minute in college.
Yeah.
Like really the only scouting footage that we had of him was I think him playing in like EYBL or something.
Yeah.
Just
I've
like one of
only
these
seen him
like
play in a high school gym, like with
random high school tournaments.
during the pandemic
Almost
too, right? So it's
yeah,
like empty high school gyms.
yeah, like basically no scouting footage over the past year. Like we didn't know anything about Shaden Sharp. We knew he was good in high school, knew he's like had the physical tools and theoretically was like this awesome shooter, but has come in and just like looked really comfortable in NBA rotation already. He's not necessarily doing a whole lot on the floor. He's playing limited minutes. He's only putting up 5 a game. His shooting has been like, okay, but it's just like a really promising look for the future. And then the other thing that's really surprised me, I'm not really sure if Chauncey Billups is going to stick with this. I kind of hope he doesn't, but he's been running a 9-man rotation early on in this season. A lot of
Yeah.
teams are like experimenting with who they're playing. They're like putting in some of their young guys for a few minutes here and there. A lot of teams have like 11, 12 guys that have seen the floor already, and the Blazers don't. So I don't know if that means that they're just Chauncey Billups knows who's good and who's going to play and who fits the system and who doesn't, or if we're going to see more guys see the floor later on in the year.
Yeah, I was surprised to see no Keon Johnson at all.
Yeah.
He's I haven't heard about an injury with him, so it does seem like he's fallen out of the rotation. They are pretty heavy on
Guards.
yeah, guys sort of like 6'6" and under. So it's not that crazy, but it is noticeable with such a short rotation, and that there's not even really guys getting garbage minutes. So
Yeah.
like yeah, looking at their stat sheet, it's like nope, they've only played 9 guys this season, and that's like I'm sure that will change at some point if they like even just don't have such close games, and maybe we'll see a couple guys who find out at least who's on the fringe of that rotation, because like right now we actually don't really know. Yeah, one other thing about, just to piggyback on what you were saying about Sharp, is like I remember J. Kyle Mann, formerly of the Dime Drop, and I think now he works for the Ringer. Like he always has great prospect breakdowns, really great videos. Check him out if you haven't seen them before. He did one on Shaden Sharp, and he's the guy who's so well informed of like players at the youth levels. And he did this long video on Shaden Sharp that I'm watching, and I'm just like, Kyle, you don't know anything about this guy because no one
Yeah,
does. Like you're
no
trying
one
your
does.
best, but it's like very clear that you are at that same level of knowledge where like you've seen the same footage I've seen. You've seen the same footage that like the scouts have seen, and that's just not much footage. So this guy is a total mystery. But yeah, I mean, I changed the channel to the Blazers game. I didn't watch the very beginning of it, and the third play I saw was Shaden stripping LeBron and going the other way, and I was like, all right, Blazers. So that's maybe when you said warm fuzzy feeling, as I was thinking of that moment, as well as Dame hitting that big shot, and then and Jerami Grant scoring over AD and LeBron, like getting past LeBron.
Yeah.
AD's help was a little bit going the wrong way, and sealing that game. So it's I mean, great start for the season for the Blazers.
Yeah, I mean the only worrying thing is I think you briefly brought this up, but Yusuf Nurkic's mobility has been concerning, and the depth behind him at the big man. Not a lot to be excited about on this roster. Drew Eubanks has a lot of concerns defensively, and there is the potential of playing Justice Winslow as kind of a small ball five. A few teams have experimented with that in the past, but there's not much
He's
to be
like
excited
he's
about.
like 6'5". Like he's like
Yeah,
not he,
and he
he's huge, but like
and he can't hit a
it's
shot. So
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, you tipped me off to Nurkic in the preseason, but I'm pretty concerned. Like I've always been a big fan of Big Nurk, but like he looks bad. He looks like he looks like he looks slow. He looks disinterested.
yeah,
Um, he looks not very self-aware. Like he's always had a little bit of a shot selection issues on offense, but now even on defense, it's just like sometimes he's like, yeah, sure, I'll pick up LeBron 40 feet from the hoop, like and try to ball pressure him, even though I can't move side to side at all. Like I remember reading an interview with like I think in the Athletic about Nurkic before last season. It was like Chauncey Billups talking about how they're going to run things through Nurk, and I was like, all right, finally we're going to get the Nurk experience. And then like
yeah,
the season fell apart, and Nurkic had his own injury issues as always, sort of thing. Like we're now looking at a guy who has only exceeded 50 games once in the past 4 seasons, and now it's like, okay, you've been injured for 5 years. You've been injured for most of your NBA career, like off and on. And now I just think, kind of like we saw with Steven Adams a few years ago, just like, oh, you're not a mobile player anymore. If you're going to
yeah.
recover, you're going to have to be a different guy, and it's not going to be a guy who switches pick and rolls and uses his quick feet, because your feet do not look quick.
Yeah, that's true. One team that I want to, while we're on the subject of teams that have kind of impressed us or surprised us or been an overall positive early on the season, is I wanted to briefly hit on the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have
Yes.
looked to, in a very limited sample size, looked to perhaps have fixed their late game offensive issues. Their last game that they played at the time of this recording was a game that went to overtime against the Washington Wizards. And they did have some kind of clanky offense down the stretch. The Wizards, I think, were down by like 5 points with less than a minute left to go, and they came back and tied it because the Cavs weren't able to, find a quality shot on offense. But then they just blitzed him in overtime. Donovan Mitchell making shots himself, making plays for others. The Cavaliers run really hard in transition. That's one thing that I've really found promising about them. And, even without Darius Garland, who's been sidelined, I think he got like scratched in the eyeball. Sounds like a
Yeah.
painful
Yeah.
injury,
I saw the play
but not one that's going to
against
keep him
Toronto.
out forever, thankfully. But yeah, they've looked really good so far.
Yeah. I think if Rudy Gobert is watching Cleveland games, he would probably have he'd probably be a little bit upset because point guard Donovan Mitchell is throwing interior passes now.
Yeah.
Um, he's connected with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley on alley oops. He's thrown all kinds of passes that I just never saw him make in Utah, which is kind of like, I think maybe he probably took that criticism to heart and worked on the offseason, or whether it has something to do with the system, because it's not like he's working with better spacing in Cleveland. He's working with like objectively much worse spacing, but he's making really advanced reads, and he's had some strong passing games, specifically getting the ball to the bigs in scoring positions, and he's made it just fine that Darius Garland is out with a minor injury right now. He's looked awesome. And in general, the Cavs seem to love to pass. Like they're throwing the ball
Yeah.
all over the court. It's not like always going amazing. They are like they're getting a lot of assists, but they're turning the ball over quite a bit. But I kind of like to see that at the beginning of a season, as like a team kind of play really aggressively and wild, and then sort of like improve and rein it in if they have to. But it's also, I think, good for developing chemistry to have teams just passing the ball a ton early and keeping everyone involved. I think it helps that kind of like team culture. They're shooting the ball really well right now, and I think that's something to watch, because they don't, especially with Garland out, like they shouldn't be a super good shooting team. I don't like Karis LeVert's hitting like a ton of threes, and CD Osman's hitting a ton of threes, Dean Wade's hitting a ton of threes, Kevin Love's hitting a ton of threes. Like they do have shooters on this roster. It just feels like that's going to come down a little bit.
Yeah, the Chetty thing is we briefly talked about when we talked about the Cavaliers last week, the potential of this being a Jay Crowder trade team. I think they need to scrap that idea, man. Chetty has looked really good to start the season. He's pushing the pace in transition. He's hitting his 3-point shot, and I will fully admit he's probably not going to sustain like his blistering pace from three for the rest of the
Yeah.
season. I don't see him shooting 60% from three on the season or anything like that, but he is one of the few positive shooters this team has. Defensively, they've looked really good so far, and so I don't think making trading one of their few really quality floor spacers for like maybe a slight defensive upgrade would be a great move.
I'm also not really convinced that Jay Crowder would be a defensive upgrade in this specific scenario. Like Jay Crowder has a really good defensive reputation and can definitely contribute on defense. But what he did in Miami and in Phoenix was guard power forwards.
Yeah,
He hasn't been a wing stopper in years, so I'm sure that he can guard power forwards better than Chidi Osman. But with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and Kevin Love playing all those minutes, like Jay Crowder being brought in to be a perimeter stopper, I think would be a miscalculation by the Cavs.
yeah.
And I don't think, even though like I see why people say it makes sense and that they do have like this hole on the wing, but I think Jay Crowder's just a little bit past his wing stopper days.